Bottles shattered against the marble floor. Milk pooled around the shards like spilled moonlight, and in the center of the nursery, 3-year-old Friedrich threw his head back and screamed with a force that made the crystal chandelier tremble. Not a tantrum, not a cry. Howl. Primal. The kind of sound that comes from a wound so deep it has no bottom. I want my real mama. His tiny fists pounded against the chest of the woman holding him, the woman wearing his dead mother's crown, the woman who smelled all wrong, who felt all wrong, whose arms were a cage instead of a sanctuary. Lady Brunhilde's face went white, then red. Her perfectly painted lips pressed into a thin line. Behind her, Alpha Wilhelm stood frozen in the doorway, watching his son reject his new bride with a fury that would have been impressive if it wasn't so utterly devastating. The wedding had been 3 days ago. His late mate, Adelheid, had been dead for 8 months. And now Wilhelm's entire pack was watching his heir apparent, the future Alpha, publicly declare war on the woman he'd chosen to replace the irreplaceable. If you've ever felt like your world was rearranged without your permission, if you've ever watched someone try to fit into a space that was carved for someone else entirely, then you need to hear this story. 'Cause what happened next changed everything. And before we go any further, I want you to do something for me. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. Because this story, it's going to wreck you in the best possible way. Drop your city in the comments right now. Now let me take you back to where this really began. Adelheid had been the kind of Luna who made grown wolves weep at her funeral. Not because she was soft, gods no, but because she was the spine of the Eisenberg pack. When she walked through the territory, children ran to her, not away from her. When she spoke at council meetings, even the eldest warriors leaned forward to catch every word. She had this way of seeing people, really seeing them, like she could peer past all your walls and armor and find the truth of who you were underneath. And she loved Wilhelm with a ferocity that terrified him sometimes. It wasn't gentle love. It wasn't easy love. It was the kind of love that demanded you become the best version of yourself, that called you out when you were being a coward, that stood beside you in battle, and expected you to be worthy of standing beside her. When the sickness took her, it was fast, brutal. 1 month she was organizing the harvest festival. The next she was too weak to hold her own son. The pack healers tried everything. Herbs, rituals, desperate prayers to the moon goddess. Nothing worked. It was like watching a star burn out. All that light, all that life, guttering like a candle in a storm. The night she died, she made Wilhelm promise her something. "Don't let Friedrich forget me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her labored breathing. Her hand, once so strong, trembled in his. "But don't make him live in my shadow either. Promise me you'll find him another mother. Someone who will love him. Not someone trying to be me. Someone who will love him as he is, not as a memorial to what we were." Wilhelm had promised. Through tears that carved rivers down his face, through a grief so massive it felt like drowning, he promised. But here's the thing about promises made at deathbeds. They're made by people who are still in shock, still bargaining with death, still trying to find a way to make the unbearable bearable. Wilhelm thought he understood what Adelheid meant. He didn't. Not even close. 8 months later he married Brunhilde. On paper she was perfect. Lady Brunhilde of the Rothenburg pack was beautiful in that calculated way. Every hair in place, every gesture measured, every word carefully chosen. She was educated, well-bred, and politically connected. Her father was an alpha who controlled 3 territories. Marrying her strengthened Wilhelm's position, secured trade routes, and promised military alliances. The council loved the match. The elders approved. Even Wilhelm's beta, Klaus, thought it was a sound strategic decision. But Friedrich knew from the moment he met her. Children have this uncanny ability to sense intention. They haven't learned to ignore their instincts yet. Haven't been taught to doubt that little voice that says something's wrong here. And every instinct in Friedrich's small body screamed danger when Brunhilde smiled at him with those cold, calculating eyes. She tried in front of others. She would kneel down to his level, speak in that syrupy voice adults use when they're performing kindness rather than feeling it. She'd offer him sweets, toys, and gentle pats on the head. But when no one was watching, her smile would vanish like smoke. Her eyes would go flat. Her voice would drop to a harsh whisper. Stop crying. Stop whining. Stop being so difficult. The first time Friedrich refused her food, Wilhelm thought it was just an adjustment. Children grieve differently from adults. They needed time. The second time, when Friedrich screamed and fought against being put to bed by Brunhilde, Wilhelm felt the first whisper of doubt. But it was the third time, the bottle incident, that changed everything. Brunhilde had insisted on being the one to give Friedrich his bedtime milk. It was a tradition Adelheid had started, this quiet ritual of warm milk with honey, stories whispered in the dim glow of firelight, lullabies hummed in a language older than words. Brunhilde wanted to claim this tradition, to wear it like she wore Adelheid's crown. But when she handed Friedrich the bottle, something in her expression must have shifted. Some mask must have slipped. Because Friedrich took one look at her, took one sip, and then hurled the bottle with all the strength in his tiny body. "I want my real mama." The words echoed through the stone corridors of the pack house. They echoed through the hearts of every wolf who heard them. They echoed through Wilhelm's soul like an accusation. And here's where it gets complicated. Because Wilhelm had done everything right, hadn't he? He'd waited a respectful amount of time. He'd chosen a suitable mate. He'd thought about the pack's needs, about political alliances, about giving his son a mother figure. He'd checked every box on the list of what a good alpha should do. But he'd forgotten the most important thing. He'd forgotten to check if Brunhilde actually loved Friedrich. He'd forgotten to check if she even wanted to be a mother, or if she just wanted to be a Luna. There's a difference. A massive one. Being a Luna means power, status, and respect. It means sitting at the right hand of the alpha, making decisions that affect hundreds of lives, wearing beautiful clothes and precious jewels. Means being important. Being a mother means getting vomited on at 3 in the morning. It means singing the same lullaby 47 times because that's what soothes the nightmare. It means putting someone else's needs before your own, over and over, for years, with no guarantee they'll even remember it when they're grown. Brunhilde wanted to be a Luna. She did not want to be a mother. And Friedrich, with that uncanny childhood wisdom, knew it. Packhouse became a war zone. Friedrich refused to eat anything Brunhilde prepared. He wouldn't let her touch him, dress him, bathe him. When she entered a room, he would run. When she tried to hold him, he would fight with a strength that seemed impossible for someone so small. The pack began to whisper. Not loudly. Never where Wilhelm could hear directly. But wolves have excellent hearing, and walls are thinner than people think. "The child rejects her," they murmured. "It's not natural, this bond. Or rather, the lack of it. The moon goddess hasn't blessed this union." He still calls for Adelheid in his sleep. Brunhilde heard the whispers too. And instead of making her softer, instead of making her try harder to connect with Friedrich, it made her bitter, resentful. She'd done everything right too, hadn't she? She'd married the alpha. She'd taken on the responsibility of a grieving pack. She'd agreed to raise another woman's child. And this was her thanks. Public humiliation. A toddler's rejection. She began to avoid Friedrich entirely. She would schedule her day so she never had to see him. She ate in her chambers instead of the family dining room. She stopped attending events where children would be present. And when Wilhelm asked her about it, when he gently suggested she spend more time with his son, she would smile that cold smile and say, "He needs time. We all need time." But time wasn't fixing anything. Time was making it worse. Because Friedrich, at 3 years old, was learning a terrible lesson. That he wasn't wanted. That his grief was an inconvenience. That his mother was gone and the woman who replaced her saw him as an obstacle rather than a child who desperately needed love. The nightmares started a month after the wedding. Friedrich would wake up screaming, reaching for arms that weren't there anymore, calling for a voice that would never answer again. And Brunhilde, in the Luna's chambers next to the nursery, would cover her ears with a pillow and pretend not to hear. It was Greta, the elderly pack nurse, who finally went to Wilhelm. Greta had been with the Eisenberg pack for 60 years. She'd delivered Wilhelm, had delivered Friedrich, had held Adelheid's hand when the sickness took her. She didn't speak often, but when she did, people listened. She found Wilhelm in his study at midnight, staring at reports he wasn't reading, drinking whiskey he wasn't tasting. "You're losing him," she said without preamble. Wilhelm looked up, exhausted. "Greta, it's late. You're losing your son." Her voice was firm. Not cruel, but uncompromising. "That boy is drowning, and you're standing on the shore watching it happen because you're too afraid to admit you made a mistake." The words hit like a physical blow. Wilhelm set down his glass with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "I did what Adelheid asked. I found him another mother. You found him a stepmother. There's a difference." Greta moved closer, her old eyes sharp. "Adelheid asked you to find someone who would love Friedrich. Tell me, Wilhelm, does Brunhilde love your son?" The silence stretched between them, heavy and damning. "She's adjusting," Wilhelm started. Love him." Wilhelm's jaw clenched. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to defend his choice, his new mate, his political alliance. But he was an alpha, and alphas don't lie. Not about things that matter. "I don't know," he finally admitted, and the words tasted like ash. "I do," Greta said quietly. "I've watched her for 3 months now. I've seen how she looks at him when she thinks no one's watching. That boy is an inconvenience to her. A reminder that she's the second choice. A complication in the life she imagined for herself. And Friedrich knows it. Children always know. What would you have me do?" Wilhelm's voice was raw. "Dissolve the marriage. Shame her family. Start a political conflict that could lead to war. I would have you remember that you're a father before you're an alpha." Greta's voice softened slightly. "I would have you remember that Friedrich didn't ask for any of this. He didn't ask to lose his mother. He didn't ask for you to replace her with someone who sees him as a burden. He's 3 years old, Wilhelm. 3. And he's already learning that his needs don't matter as much as politics and appearances." Wilhelm stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The full moon hung heavy in the sky, watching. Always watching. "Adelheid asked me to move on," he said to the darkness. "She didn't want me to mourn forever. She wanted Friedrich to have a mother." "Adelheid wanted you to find love again," Greta corrected. "She wanted Friedrich to be loved. Not just provided for. Not just politically advantaged. Loved. There's a reason the moon goddess gives us mates, Wilhelm. It's not about strategy. It's not about alliances. It's about souls recognizing each other. About love that transforms. About bonds that heal. You think I don't know that?" Wilhelm's hands pressed against the cold glass. "I had that with Adelheid. Lightning doesn't strike twice." "Maybe not," Greta acknowledged. "But you don't solve the absence of lightning by covering everything in darkness. Brunhilde isn't cruel. She's just wrong. Wrong for you. Wrong for Friedrich. Wrong for this pack. And every day you pretend otherwise, you're teaching your son that love doesn't matter. That his pain doesn't matter. That he doesn't matter." The words landed like blows, each one perfectly aimed. Wilhelm thought about Friedrich's screams. The way his son flinched when Brunhilde entered a room. The way the light had gone out of those little eyes that used to sparkle with mischief and joy. The way his heir apparent, who should be learning to be strong and brave and kind, was instead learning to be small and quiet and scared. "What do I do?" he whispered. And Greta, who had seen 3 generations of Eisenbergs struggle and triumph and fail and rise again, said simply, "You do the hard thing. You admit you were wrong. You put your son first. You remember that being an alpha means protecting your pack, and your son is pack. He's your pack before anyone else." The next morning, Wilhelm called a council meeting. Brunhilde sat at his right hand, wearing Adelheid's crown, perfectly composed. She thought this was routine business. She had no idea her world was about to shift. "I have an announcement," Wilhelm began. His voice was steady, but those who knew him well could hear the tremor underneath. I have made a decision that affects the future of our pack. The council leaned forward. Brunhilde's smile was serene, anticipating praise or new responsibilities. My marriage to Lady Brunhilde was entered in good faith, Wilhelm continued. But it has become clear that this union, while politically advantageous, is not in the best interest of my son. Friedrich is the future of the Eisenberg pack. His well-being must come before any alliance, any strategy, any convenience. Brunhilde's smile froze. The council erupted in murmurs. What are you saying? Brunhilde's voice was cold. Wilhelm met her eyes. I'm saying that I made a mistake. I chose a Luna when I should have been choosing a mother. I prioritized politics over my child's heart. And I cannot continue on this path. You're dissolving our marriage. Brunhilde stood, her composure cracking. After 3 months. Because your son throws tantrums. Because my son is miserable, Wilhelm corrected. His alpha authority sliding into his voice like a blade from a sheath. Because he cries for his mother every night and the woman who should be comforting him covers her ears. Because he's 3 years old and already learning that love is conditional. That's not a tantrum. That's trauma. The council chamber went silent. You could hear hearts beating, breath catching. This is humiliating, Brunhilde hissed. My father will. Your father will understand that I am putting my heir first, Wilhelm interrupted. As any true alpha would. I bear you no ill will, Brunhilde. You are intelligent, capable, and you will make an excellent Luna for someone else. But not here. Not for us. Not for Friedrich. Brunhilde looked around the room, seeking allies. But even those who had supported the marriage were silent. Because they'd all heard the screams. They'd all seen the child growing smaller and sadder. They'd all known on some level that this wasn't working. I want the crown returned, Wilhelm said quietly. It was Adelheid's. It will be Friedrich's to give to his own mate one day. For a moment, it looked like Brunhilde might refuse. Her hand went to the crown, her fingers trembling with rage or grief or wounded pride. But she was many things, calculating, ambitious, proud, but she was not stupid. She knew when a battle was lost. She removed the crown slowly, deliberately, placed it on the table between them. Then she stood straight-backed and furious, and walked out of the council chamber without another word. The marriage was dissolved within a week. Brunhilde returned to her father's territory with a generous settlement and a promise that no ill would be spoken of her. The political fallout was manageable. Alpha Rothenberg was disappointed but pragmatic. He had other daughters, other alliances to pursue. But the real change happened in the nursery. The first night after Brunhilde left, Wilhelm carried Friedrich to bed himself. The boy was stiff in his arms, cautious, like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. She's gone, Wilhelm said softly, sitting on the edge of the small bed. Lady Brunhilde has returned to her own pack. She won't be coming back. Friedrich's eyes, so like Adelheid's, searched his father's face. Really? Really? Wilhelm brushed hair back from his son's forehead. I'm sorry, Friedrich. I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I hurt you instead. I should have listened to you. I should have believed you when you said something was wrong. I want Mama, Friedrich whispered, and it wasn't an accusation anymore. Just grief. Pure and simple and honest. I know, Wilhelm said, and his voice broke. I want her too. Every single day. But she's gone and I can't bring her back. All I can do is promise you that I will never, ever put anyone else before you again. You're my son. You're my heir. You're my heart. And from now on we figure this out together. No more strangers. No more trying to replace what we lost. Just us. Is that okay? Friedrich thought about it with that serious expression children get when they're trying to process something too big for their small experience. Then he nodded. Just us. Just us. Wilhelm agreed. That night, for the first time in 3 months, Friedrich slept through until morning. The pack house slowly came back to life. Without the tension of Brunhilde's presence, without the constant worry about what new trauma each day would bring, the walls seemed to breathe easier. Children played in the corridors again. Laughter returned to the dining hall. And Friedrich began to heal. It wasn't fast. Healing never is. There were still nightmares. Still moments of overwhelming grief when he would see something that reminded him of Adelheid. The smell of her favorite flowers, a song she used to sing, the way sunlight fell through the windows of her old garden. But Wilhelm was there for all of it. He cleared his schedule to have dinner with Friedrich every night. He was the one to respond to the nightmares, to offer comfort, to sit in the darkness and wait until the fear passed. He learned to braid his daughter's hair the way Adelheid used to. Not perfectly, but with love. He read bedtime stories in funny voices that made Friedrich giggle. He taught his son to ride a horse, to track prey through the forest, to howl at the moon with pure joy instead of pain. And slowly, day by day, the light came back into Friedrich's eyes. Greta watched it all with quiet satisfaction. Klaus, the beta, admitted he'd been wrong about the marriage. The pack elders nodded approvingly when they saw their alpha and his heir together, rebuilding what grief had broken. But there was one thing Wilhelm learned, one truth that settled into his bones like ancient wisdom. You cannot rush healing. You cannot manufacture love. You cannot force connections that the soul rejects. All you can do is show up. Be present. Choose the hard right over the easy wrong. Again and again and again. The weeks after Brunhilde's departure were like watching spring come after a brutal winter. Slow at first, almost imperceptible. Then suddenly everywhere you looked there was evidence of new life. Friedrich started eating again. Not just mechanically consuming food to stay alive, but actually enjoying meals. Wilhelm would catch him sneaking extra helpings of Greta's honey cakes. His cheeks stuffed like a little squirrel, eyes bright with the kind of mischief that had been absent for months. The pack children, who had kept their distance during Brunhilde's tenure, sensing the tension the way animals sense an approaching storm, began seeking Friedrich out again. Soon, the courtyards echoed with the sounds of games and laughter, of mock battles and grand adventures imagined into existence by minds unfettered by adult cynicism. Wilhelm watched his son transform day by day, and with each small victory, each nightmare that didn't come, each meal eaten without protest, each genuine smile, he felt both profound relief and crushing guilt. How had he let it get so bad? How had he convinced himself that Friedrich just needed time to adjust, when what his son actually needed was protection from a situation that was slowly poisoning him? One afternoon, about 6 weeks after the dissolution, Wilhelm found himself in Adelheid's old study. He hadn't been able to enter this room since her death. Her scent still lingered faintly in the curtains, in the books she'd loved, in the chair where she'd spent countless hours reading and thinking and planning for their pack's future. He sat in that chair now, running his hands over the worn armrests, and did something he hadn't allowed himself to do since the funeral. He wept. Not the stoic, controlled grief of an alpha who must remain strong for his pack, but the raw, gasping sobs of a man who had lost his soulmate and nearly lost his son in the aftermath. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the empty room, to Adelheid's ghost, to his own failures. "I thought I was keeping my promise. I thought I was doing what you asked. But I almost destroyed him. I almost let my duty as an alpha override my duty as a father, and I nearly lost everything that matters because of it." The room offered no answers, only silence. But it was a different kind of silence than he'd experienced before. Not the suffocating quiet of grief denied, but the peaceful stillness of truth acknowledged. When Klaus found him there an hour later, Wilhelm's eyes were red but clear. The beta stood in the doorway, uncertain whether to intrude. "Come in," Wilhelm said, his voice rough but steady. "I'm not hiding anymore." Klaus entered carefully, taking the seat across from his alpha. They'd known each other since childhood, had trained together, fought together, and built this pack's strength together. If anyone had earned the right to speak plainly, it was Klaus. "I should have said something sooner," Klaus began. "About Brunhilde." About Friedrich. I saw the signs, but I convinced myself it was none of my business. That you knew what you were doing. I didn't know, Wilhelm admitted. I was so focused on doing the right thing that I forgot to check if it was actually right. There's a difference between what looks right on paper and what's right in reality. The pack is saying you showed great strength, Klaus offered. Admitting you were wrong, putting Friedrich first, choosing the hard path instead of the convenient one. Wilhelm laughed bitterly. It shouldn't be considered strength to choose your own child over politics. That should be baseline. The fact that it's seen as remarkable is depressing. Most alphas wouldn't have done it, Klaus said quietly. Once a political marriage is made, most would double down. Insist everyone adjust. Punish the child for failing to adapt. You didn't do that. Only because Greta made me see what I was doing. Wilhelm leaned forward, elbows on his knees. And because Friedrich's howl finally penetrated the wall I'd built around my own grief. He wasn't throwing a tantrum. He was screaming for help, and I'd been too blind to see it. Klaus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that Wilhelm would carry with him for the rest of his life. Adelheid would be proud of you. Not because you chose perfectly the first time, but because you had the courage to choose again when you realized you were wrong. That's what leadership actually is. Not infallibility, but the strength to course correct when you discover you've gone off path. The words settled into Wilhelm's chest like a benediction. Like forgiveness. He hadn't known he needed. 5 years passed. Friedrich grew into a bright, curious 8-year-old who still missed his mother but no longer felt crushed by her absence. He learned to hold both truths, that he'd lost something irreplaceable, and that life still held joy and wonder and possibility. Wilhelm remained unmarried. The council occasionally suggested suitable matches, but he politely declined. He'd learned his lesson. When and if he took another mate, it would be because his soul recognized hers. Because Friedrich's smile was genuine in her presence. Because love found them, not because strategy demanded it. One autumn evening, as Wilhelm was walking through the territory, he came across Friedrich sitting by the river where Adelheid used to love to watch the sunset. The boy was talking quietly, and Wilhelm realized he was talking to his mother. I got top marks in strategy today, Friedrich was saying to the water, to the sky, to wherever he believed Adelheid's spirit listened from. Father says you would be proud. Think you would too. I'm trying to be strong like you were. But also kind. Klaus says being strong without kindness is just being a bully. Wilhelm's throat tightened. I miss you, Friedrich continued. But it's not the sad kind of missing anymore. It's more like you're still here, just in a different way. Like when I do something good I can feel you smiling. Is that weird? It's not weird, Wilhelm said softly, announcing his presence. He sat down beside his son. I feel her too sometimes. Usually, when I'm making a difficult decision and I ask myself what she would do. Friedrich leaned against his father's shoulder. Do you think you'll marry again someday? Maybe, Wilhelm said honestly. If the moon goddess sends someone who fits us, who loves us, who makes our pack better just by being in it. But not because a council thinks it's time. Not because it looks good politically. Only if it's real. Good, Friedrich said firmly. Then with a child's perfect seriousness. Next time I get to approve her first. Wilhelm laughed, a real laugh that startled the birds from nearby trees. Deal. You get full veto power. They sat together as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, a father and son learning to carry their grief without letting it crush them, learning that love doesn't end just because someone dies, learning that family isn't always about who's present. Sometimes it's about honoring who's absent while still making room for joy. The bottle that shattered on the marble floor had been swept up long ago. But the lesson it taught remained. Love cannot be commanded. Trust cannot be demanded. Connection cannot be manufactured. And the moment you try to force it, the moment you prioritize appearance over authenticity, strategy over soul, you lose the very thing you were trying to create. Friedrich's howl, I want my real mama, had been more than a child's tantrum. It had been a truth that couldn't be denied. a rejection of falseness, a demand for authenticity in a world that too often settles for comfortable lies. Wilhelm heard it. He listened. And in listening, he saved not just his relationship with his son, but his own soul. Because here's the thing they don't tell you about grief and moving forward. It's not about replacing what you lost. It's not about filling the hole with anything that fits. It's about learning to live with the absence while still remaining open to new presence. It's about honoring the dead while still serving the living. It's about making room for both the pain and the possibility. Years later, when Friedrich was grown and preparing to take over as Alpha himself, he would tell this story to his own pack. About the time he rejected Aluna because his instincts screamed danger. About the time his father chose him over politics. About the time a single moment of absolute honesty changed everything. And he would tell them, trust your instincts, honor your grief, demand authenticity, because the easy path and the right path are rarely the same thing. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is howl your truth into the world, even if your voice shakes, even if others tell you you're wrong, even if it shatters everything around you. Because sometimes, he would say, looking at his own children, things need to shatter before they can be rebuilt correctly. The crown that Brunhilde returned sat in a vault for many years. When Friedrich eventually found his true mate, a healer named Lieselot who made him laugh and challenged him and loved him with a fierce tenderness his mother once had, he gave it to her. But first, he had it melted down and reforged. Same gold, same jewels, but a new design. Because while you honor what came before, you don't trap yourself in its exact shape. You take the precious materials and create something new. Something that fits the life you're actually living, not the life you lost or the life someone else thinks you should have. And on quiet nights, when Friedrich's own children asked about their grandmother Adelheid, he would tell them stories. Not sad stories, though sadness was part of them. Stories about strength and love and truth. About a Luna who was brave enough to ask her mate to move forward. About an Alpha who was brave enough to admit he was wrong. About a little boy who was brave enough to reject what didn't serve him, even when the whole world said he should accept it. Your grandmother, he would tell them, taught me that love is not obedience. It's not going along to get along. Real love wants you to thrive, not just survive. Real love doesn't ask you to betray yourself to keep the peace. And real love recognizes real love. Your soul knows when it's found the real thing versus a cheap imitation. The story of the bottle and the howl became legend in the Eisenberg pack. A reminder that sometimes the youngest voice speaks the loudest truth. That sometimes saying no is the most powerful thing you can do. That sometimes protecting what matters means disappointing people who expect you to sacrifice yourself on the altar of their expectations. And every time a wolf in that pack faced a choice between what was easy and what was right, between what looked good and what felt true, they would remember. They would remember a 3-year-old boy who refused to be silenced, who rejected falseness even when adults insisted he accept it, who trusted his instincts when everyone around him said he was just being difficult. They would remember that his father listened. And they would remember that in the end, truth always costs less than pretending. So here's what I want you to take from this. Your instincts matter. Your voice matters. The things that make your soul scream in protest, those matter. Don't let anyone convince you to override your deepest knowing for the sake of convenience or appearances or someone else's comfort. And if you're the one in power, if you're the one making decisions that affect others, listen. Really listen. Especially to those who have no political leverage, no strategic value, nothing to offer except their honest truth. Because sometimes a child's howl contains more wisdom than an entire council of experts. The bottle shattered. The milk spilled. The crown was returned. And in the wreckage of what wasn't working, space was made for what could. That's not just a story. That's a map. Guide. A reminder that you are allowed to reject what doesn't serve you, even if it looks perfect on paper. Even if everyone else thinks you're making a mistake. Even if your voice shakes and your hands tremble and you're terrified of the consequences. Because the cost of silencing yourself is always higher than the cost of speaking your truth. Always. And if you found something valuable in this story, Something that resonated in your chest or brought tears to your eyes or made you think about your own life differently. Then do me a favor. Share this. Someone in your life needs to hear it. Someone is being pressured to accept a situation that's wrong for them. Someone needs permission to trust their instincts. Someone needs to know that it's okay to reject the crown if the crown doesn't fit. Be the person who passes this message along. Be the Greta who speaks the uncomfortable truth. Be the Wilhelm who has the courage to admit mistakes. Be the Friedrich who howls when something's wrong. Because the world has enough people staying silent. What it needs is more people willing to shatter a few bottles in pursuit of the truth. What it needs is more people willing to say, "This doesn't fit. This isn't right. I want something real." Even if their voice shakes. Even if the milk spills. Even if everything breaks. Because sometimes, breaking is the beginning of building something better.